Anthony Albanese announced on the weekend. Let's bring in Liberal Senator for New South Wales now, Holly Hughes, who joins us from Canberra. Thanks for joining us, Holly. Just quickly on The Voice, we know that Peter Dutton and Julian Leeser say that the opposition want to see the detail of how Labor would legislate a voice. In government, you came up with a report that gives you a lot of detail how you'd legislate a voice. It's going to be easy to sit back and watch how the debate plays out and work out which way the political wind is blowing. But in principle, do you want to see a voice to Parliament, a voice to the federal Parliament and government delivered?
I think we do need to see the detail, and I think that's first and foremost.
Can I just jump in there? That's exactly what I want to avoid. Let's forget about it. You want to see the detail? Yeah, yada, yada, yada. But in principle, do you think it's a good thing for us to strive towards, or do you see it as divisive and something you should oppose?
Well, because we don't know the detail, I can't answer that definitively, but I do have concerns that this would start to see us not as all Australians. And remember, this is a constitutional change. So no longer are we representing, the Constitution's talking about all Australians. It is putting us into two groups. And I do worry that that has the possibility of dividing us rather than bringing us together.
The Constitution has always had race in it from day one. From day one.
There's a recognition when rights were put through. It was, you know, if we look at constitutions around the world, women weren't quite equal to a man either at times. So,
yes, but this idea that it puts race into the Constitution is absolutely the opposite, because Indigenous Australians were mentioned in the Constitution only to exclude them previously, and there's still race-based powers in the Constitution, so it's a matter of just whether or not a voice is worthwhile. You don't want to say just up front on principle, with all the usual caveats, whether you favour the idea of this ideal or whether you oppose it.
I don't know what it's going to look like. Is Parliament going to have the ability to dismantle this if there are problems? We saw what happened when we had the ATSIC body, and that needed to be repealed. If we end up in a situation, we don't know who's going to be elected to this, we don't know how much it's going to cost, we don't know what it's going to do to actually implement better outcomes for Indigenous Australians. We don't know any of that.
But you do know that a government could change it at any time if these. It couldn't eradicate it without a referendum, but it could change it through legislation at any time.
Well, you know, if a referendum, we have had 8 of 44 referendums in this country passed. So if this is something that wants to be done properly, it needs to be done properly.
Sure does.
It can't be done on a this makes me feel good, so therefore I'm going to offer unconditional support.
I'm not what we're here we've got to have the debate. We've got to have the debate, and I'm not after unconditional support. I'm wondering whether you aspire to it or not.
Well, your former guest just commented that Lydia Thorpe is a green voice and Jacinta Price is a blue voice, and he doesn't hear a black voice. Well, one of the points that's been made by both Senator Thorpe and Senator Price is the Indigenous community is not a homogenous voice.
Of course not.
So what does the black voice represent? Well, they have 11 Indigenous representatives in Parliament now, elected from across the range of the political spectrum. So that voice is now within the political parties and now being elected to represent their constituencies in the federal Parliament, which is a voice of the people. So I do think we need to look at this, because there isn't a homogenous black voice.
Of course there's not. That's why we're talking about some sort of representative group.
One of the senators today, and I think it may have been Senator Cox from the Greens, made the point today, I think it was her, I'll have to check who it was, made a comment that they were involved in the Uluru of the Heart statement, and said that it was not total consensus of how it ended up coming out. So we need to be careful that it isn't one group driving an agenda while other Indigenous Australians who are perhaps not as connected, and you look at those in the really remote communities, do they know what this means for them? Is it representing them? And I don't think one simple sentence in any stretch of the imagination will encourage Australians to come out and vote yes. I don't think that is enough detail for them, and we have the historic issue that only 8 of 44 have ever passed.
We don't have time to go on to those other issues. Thanks for joining us, Holly. I appreciate it. Senator Holly Hughes there. There was a broad